Hi, everyone.
Hey,
Hi.
how's it going?
Okay, you?
Eh, you know,
Yeah.
as the Jews say.
Meh. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
yeah. So I'll just be, I think most people watching this know that something very sad happened, which is that the great podcaster, on-air personality, YouTuber, Michael Brooks died. And we're like actually really, within that tragedy, we're really lucky that that Nando is here because Nando was like a really close friend of Michael's and had and worked with him. And we're gonna have Nando's going to talk about Michael, and also we're going to be talking to Daniel Bessner, another friend and collaborator of Michael's, and we may have some other people sharing. But do you want to just start off by sharing whatever you want to share about this?
yeah. Mike was my friend. I mean, I met him in 2017. I actually went back and looked at the DMs. I mean, he actually reached out to me on Twitter and DM me, and he's like, "Hey, man, the shit that's going on in Spain is crazy. You wanna come on my show and talk about it? I saw you on Dead Pundits, and I really liked what you had to say." And I was like, "Oh man, thanks." Sure, yeah, of course, I'll go on your show. And then I watched a few of his episodes that he had just started the show. Like he maybe had 2 or 3 episodes of his kind of TMBS show, the sort of spinoff that he did from the Majority Report. And I went on, and he kind of kept up the friendship in a way, and I figured like, oh, I'll go on and then I'll just kind of live my life. And he didn't let me do that. And he made sure that we were friends, and we became very good friends. It's kind of like, how you and I met. Like, you asked me to be on your show, and I was like, yeah, of course. And then we became friends, instead of just kind of going off in our separate ways. And Mike just did that. And then, we would talk all the time. I think that he was very ambitious and very strategic in his thinking. And he wanted big things for both himself, but for the left. I think he appreciated that, like, he saw me as like a little bit more polished than other people kind of on the left. Like, I come from a mainstream media background, kind of thing. And I was working at a big cable network. I mean, it's not a big cable network, but a cable network, and I had like,
By which you means TV. I'm just kidding.
What?
By which you means TV.
Yeah, no.
Right?
Yeah, Fusion. And I think that he was very strategic in the way he thought about this kind of thing, because he was like, well, this is something that we need. Like, we can't just be like bearded, Birkenstock wearing, disgusting people with like a, you know what I mean? Like, we need to be polished, because we need to appeal to a mainstream audience. Like, we need to go mainstream. Like, and he was always thinking that. And yeah, so we became really close friends, and we would talk all the time. I mean, we would talk basically every day about, whatever was in the news, the discourse, who was annoying, who was not, like who, he would always send me these, like, and because he was like a very well-read dude, and he was very connected to global movements all over the world. And he would always send me, something to read about, something going on in South Africa or something. And so we became really good friends. And then eventually he asked me to join him on his weekly show that he did with Wozni Lambre, Big Woz, on the Black Opinions Matter podcast feed, which is part of the Count the Dings network. And he was like, hey, why don't you come on as a full-time co-host? And I was like, yeah, for sure. Of course. And we did that for every week. We would go on and shoot the shit about whatever was going on in the news. We saw it as kind of like a way to do kind of like the entry point for people into politics. It was kind of like, I think the people who are fans of the Count the Dings network, a lot of people are sports fans or hip hop fans and things like that. And he saw that as an opportunity. Like if we kind of just talked about what's going on in the news from kind of a left socialist perspective in a way that was kind of chill and not, super jargony, and just kind of that we could get people who maybe would not be interested in this kind of thing, get their foot in the door, and then maybe then they could listen to or watch his show, which is like very theory based and very kind of, high level stuff for the most part. I mean, he also did like silly stuff and fun stuff all the time, but he might have like, he might have a whole long segment on a miners' strike in fucking Sudan, or also like a whole thing on, Gramsci versus, whatever the fuck, you know what I mean? And so what he was thinking is like, maybe we'll get these people get the foot in the door, and then maybe they can then kind of solidify their political understanding on my show. And I saw that bear out. Like I saw that thing work out exactly as he planned. Ever since he passed, people have been approaching me. He's like, hey man, like I didn't know anything about the left or politics, and until I started listening to you guys on the Woke Bros, and now I'm a committed socialist, and I'm like, shit, that's cool. So yeah, I mean, I'm just still kind of in shock and in a state of absolute grief. I mean, it was just so sudden. Like I was talking to him the day before he died, I don't know, we were laughing at some dumb tweet or something, that someone put out, and then the next day he was gone. It was so bizarre. I mean, people are talking about Mike's book. I actually read his book, and I'm happy that I was able to read it before he died and tell him that I read it, so that he knew that I read it. Like I showed him pictures of like pages and passages that I thought were funny and things like that. And, I highly recommend everyone to read it. It's super short, which I guess there's no excuse not to read it. It's not like this fucking weighty tome. It's like, you can read it in 2 or 3 hours. And it's great because it captures Mike perfectly, and that he was not afraid to challenge head on these ideas that he thought were rancid, and he would do it, and he would do it in a confident and thorough and funny way often. I mean, his book is called Against the Web, which is basically why the people in the intellectual dark web, the Sam Harrises, the Weinstein brothers, the Ben Shapiros of the world are full of shit. And it was just a very straightforward, head on, they're full of shit for these reasons, not like because they're bad or because they're racist or something, it's like because like they don't make any fucking sense, and because like and he would actually like dismantle all their arguments in a sort of very systematic way. I mean, it was very helpful to me, like I don't spend fucking a single second of my time listening to Sam Harris's podcast. Like, no way. I don't spend a single second of my time listening to the Ben Shapiro podcast. Like, and Mike was like, no, I realize that these people have appeal, that they have a large audience, that young people who are kind of aimless politically might stumble upon them and find their arguments compelling. And I need to present like a beachhead against that, and he did, and it was very effective, and it's just a very, very good thing to read. Sorry, my table's a little weird. So yeah, I mean, it's just I'm devastated. I've never had, I don't know if you have, Katie. I've never had someone like so close to me just die like that. I mean, my 2 grandfathers died or whatever, but that's kind of like expected. Right. I've never had like a friend or someone like that just go like that. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I haven't had anyone that I'm like that close, as remotely as close to me as Michael was to you. And yeah, it's like, I mean, it brings up so much. I mean, it's hard for me to talk about this without fearing like I'm sounding like a cliche, but death does that. It brings those things out, right? Like cliches, because cliches are cliches for a reason. But no, it's funny, and then this is such a like intensely bizarre time, and everything is so heightened and exaggerated, and it's like with COVID, and it feels like when you're really like tired, it's like everything's heightened in a way that when you're just like overly emotional for some other reason anyway, like if you're really if something terrible happens and you haven't slept enough, and it's like makes it that much harder, you know. So I feel like we're living in this state now, and all of these things are like that much harder, and in some cases it's because of what's happening now, like when there are lots of people who are having health issues, obviously, and there's and as Michael's sister made very clear, this was not a suicide. And I'm just mentioning that because something else that we are dealing with in the background is all this despair, right? And people are shut in, and I just feel like all of these things are in the air, and people are thinking about life and death and connection and seeing people and communities and providing homes for people now that we can't be in person. And so, of course, shows like Michael's were already kind of this home for people, or this community for people, and that much more when people are stuck at home. They have that much more that they're trying to get through non-physical interactions. And this wasn't a case of someone who, like, someone else I know died last week, and actually on Sunday I'm going to be having on Christian Parenti talk about him, Rob Eshelman. And some people are dying. His death wasn't COVID related, but there was a lot of stress in his life. And I'm not, Christian will talk about this, but there was a lot of stress in his life, and he was worried about work. And anyway, this was not a death that was brought on by COVID or brought on by isolation or anything like that. It seemed like it really was a fluke, and horrible. And it's like moving in some ways, because it's so moving to see the outpouring of grief and support and appreciation. And I was listening to a bunch of, I think it was Bhaskar talking to Sam Cedar. And one of them said I think it was Sam, who was, of course, like me, this like unrepentant, secular Jewish atheist. I guess I'm agnostic technically, because I have a teeny bit of doubt. I don't know what Sam is. I assume Sam is probably an atheist. But he said something like, he would have loved to have seen how like moved people were by this, and how many people are saying, he helped me so much. He shaped my worldview. I counted on him for so much stuff. And as someone who comes from a long line of people who don't believe in God, I've often been like, wish that I could say, well, he would have wanted this, he would have wanted that. Or really, he's looking down now. And I don't know about Michael's spirituality. I just know he had a spiritual practice.
Yeah.
And it kind of gives me, it's a little weird because it's not my worldview, but it kind of gives me some solace knowing that he like saw the world in that way.
Yeah. He was very spiritual. I mean, he was very big into, Buddhism and things like that. And he loved, like, one of the things that attracted him to all the sort of left politics in Latin America was its sort of spiritual base and liberation theology. Right. He like loved all that stuff. He was big into yoga and meditation, and, he thought that it was impossible to build a proper internationalist left without a degree of spirituality attached to it, that sort of personal, conscious building and consciousness building, was a prerequisite for any proper left movement that was humane and based in sort of these humanist values. I mean, and it's, I've been touched to see the outpouring. I mean, the fact that Lula da Silva, Fernando Haddad, Cornel West, his name escapes me now, this South African ANC former Communist Party member, all posted about him. It showed Michael was extremely, like I said, he was very strategic in his thinking. And one of the things that he thought was like, There are people who have done this before. There are people who have done this before. What we're trying to do, build a left, there are people who've done this before. I need to be as close to them as possible. I need to understand them. I need to understand their trajectories, their tactics, their strategies. I need to respect them. I need to give them their proper place in history. And I need to learn from them. And I think that that's why he was so obsessed with Lula. I mean, Lula is probably the most successful leftist in 50 years, right? You know, in terms of like, I don't know, in terms of material gains for a large number of people, there probably is no one who has done more to help more people than Lula, you know? And so Mike was like, that was why he liked him. No other reason. I mean, that was it. You know, it's like, he did it. He fucking did it. So what can I do to learn from that? You know? And it was amazing to see all those people posting about some fucking Brooklyn, you know, left media guy. You know what I mean? Like, that's incredible, really. You know, who else could say that? I mean, not me. You know, if I were to go tomorrow, that would not, you know, that would not be the case. Is the point? I mean, he was just better at that kind of thing. And you know, it really is. You know, it's something to learn from. You know, it's something to learn from. It's a sense of humility that I think is lacking in a lot of young people. You know, and I consider us young, Katie. We're still in the cohort barely, but you know, that sense of humility that there's learning to be done from the people who have been there before. You know, that we're not going to reinvent the wheel, that there is no, you know, one of the things we always joke about on his show whenever I went on was that the cliche in politics that, you know, we need new ideas for these new problems. It's like, no, the new ideas are bullshit. We need the old ideas. The old ideas are fine. It's just a matter of doing them, you know? And there's people who've already thought everything you think you have to like think through, you know, some complicated political question. I guarantee you there was like some Bolshevik fucking guy in 1906 who was already thinking about it, you know, and probably in a much more effective way than you have. So that was one of the things that he was always committed to, is like understanding people's liberation movements around the world, people's liberation movements throughout history, and how they did it, and like very committed to actually doing it here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, one of the last, I'm not revealing anything personal, and we can talk more about, like, I think a lot of people are kind of like kicking themselves in the way that they do when someone dies. It's like, I wish I had gotten that coffee with that person. And it's heightened again because of this world we're living in, COVID. Things, you know, there is a powerlessness that we're feeling. And we can't just go out and meet that person. We can't just like hop on a plane like we would have before. And I think a lot of people are, you know, with relative degrees of varying degrees of compassion, like regretting things, like not, you know, Bhaskar said he texted him happy birthday and like it didn't go through. He was like looking at the texts and he saw it hadn't been sent or something. He saw like the red exclamation mark. Yeah, I think it's just a hard time, and we're that much more like online now. And so I don't know. But I this weekend, I texted him the name of someone, Melba Pearson, who everyone should check out her campaign in Florida. And I was like, you should totally interview her. She's running against the devil. Catherine Rundle.
Kathy Fernandez Rundle. I know her well. Yeah. She's from my home state of Florida.
Yeah. Total terrible, evil person. Yes. And he was like, thanks, I'll check it out. Sounds great.